For the first time in humankind's history, we have extensive evidence that proves, without a doubt, you and your loved ones will live together in the afterlife. There are too many evidential testimonies to fit into a series of videos, so I've chosen an experience from each of 15 areas of evidence that you will live on after your body dies. This is the third of 4 videos containing the evidence. Hello, I'm Dr. R. Craig Hogan, President of the Afterlife Research and Education Institute and Seek Reality Online. I'm the author of 8 books containing the evidence there is no death and there are no dead. Your loved ones now in the afterlife are alive and well. They fervently want to communicate with you to tell you they're fine. Don't worry about the transition at the end of this life. It is painless and will be a wonderful reunion. Today we have many thousands of testimonials and verified accounts in each of 15 areas of evidence of life after death. This is the third of 4 videos with examples from these areas of evidence. Links to the other videos are in the descriptions below. You can read more of the evidence in my book, Evidence Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, You Will Never Die, available on Amazon. The 11th area of evidence in this series, proving we live on after the body dies, is that great numbers of people have had afterlife communication experiences with their loved ones living in the afterlife. And the studies asking people whether they've had these experiences show how common they are. A survey of studies of afterlife communication found that 30% to 35% of people have experienced some type of afterlife communication with their loved ones. In a study of adults in Los Angeles, 55% of Blacks, 54% of Mexican Americans, 38% of Anglo Americans, and 29% of Japanese Americans reported encounters with their deceased loved ones. Another study by a prominent researcher found that 70 to 80% of widows and widowers had unmistakable visions of departed spouses that occurred to them while they were in a waking state. The differences in statistics depend on how the researchers set up the studies and ask the questions. What is important across these studies is that afterlife communication is not unusual. The experiences are remarkably common. Some of these afterlife communications convey information the person could not have known. This is one example.
In some cases, people appear apparently with the express purpose of saving loved ones from danger. This happened to Elaine Worrell, who lived with her husband Hal on the top floor of an apartment building in Oskaloosa, Iowa. One day she saw a young man in her hallway who led her downstairs into the apartment of a young widow whom she barely knew. She found the young woman collapsed on a bed after having slashed her wrists. After she recovered, the young woman showed Elaine a photograph of her late husband. Elaine recognized it immediately as the young man who had led her downstairs and into the apartment.
People commonly have communications with their loved ones alive and well in the afterlife. It is a generally accepted fact of life. The reason is that we know without a doubt we continue to live after the body dies. The 12th area of evidence you will never die is in the fact that we are part of our universal intelligence that never dies. We're just playing roles during this brief time in Earth School. In this narration from the book, Evidence Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, You Will Never Die, people who have been blind since birth are able to see during near-death experiences. Their eternal self that was never blind emerges when the body is shut down. Their ability to see was just hidden during their time in Earth School, so they could learn lessons from being blind. This is a narrated account of a woman who had been blind since birth, being able to see during her near-death experience.
The surgery had gone smoothly until the late stages of the operation. Then something happened. As her physician was closing the incision, Sarah's heart stopped beating. When she awoke, Sarah had a clear, detailed memory of the frantic conversation of the surgeons and nurses during her cardiac arrest, the operating room layout, the scribbles on the surgery schedule board in the hall outside, the color of the sheets covering the operating table, the hairstyle of the head scrub nurse, the names of the surgeons in the doctor's lounge down the corridor who were waiting for her case to be concluded, and even the trivial fact that her anesthesiologist was wearing unmatched socks. All this she knew even though she had been fully anesthetized and unconscious during the surgery and the cardiac arrest. But what made Sarah's vision even more momentous was the fact that since birth, she had been blind.
The woman was able to see during her near-death experience because her blindness was just part of her role in Earth School. Her eternal self was not blind. So when her mind was released from the body, she was able to see clearly. That demonstrates that when we are released from the body at the end of this life, we will live on with all our abilities, senses, and personalities perfectly intact. The 13th area of evidence we continue to live after the body dies is that our minds are not in our brains. So when the brain dies, our minds continue to live. Following is a short sample spoken by narrators of statements by highly regarded scientists that your mind is not in your brain. Dr. Stanislav Grof, Freudian psychoanalyst, assistant professor of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, and chief of psychiatric research at the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center.
My first idea was that consciousness has to be hardwired in the brain. I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out how something like that is possible. Today, I came to the conclusion that it is not coming from the brain. I don't think you can locate the source of consciousness. I am quite sure it is not in the brain, not inside of the skull.
Sir John Eccles, internationally recognized brain scientist, whose work has had a major influence on brain research.
The mind is a separate entity from the brain, and mental processes cannot be reduced to neurochemical brain processes, but on the contrary, direct them. A mind may conceivably exist without a brain.
Sir Cyril Burt, educational psychologist, renowned for his studies on the effects of heredity on intelligence.
The brain is not an organ that generates consciousness, but rather an instrument evolved to transmit and limit the processes of consciousness and of conscious attention, so as to restrict them to those aspects of the material environment which at any moment are crucial for the terrestrial success of the individual. In that case, such phenomena as telepathy and clairvoyance would be merely instances in which some of the limitations were removed.
Dr. Wilder Penfield, pioneering Canadian neuroscientist and brain surgeon, who operated on over 1,000 epilepsy patients while they were awake. They were under local anesthesia, and he found that no stimulation of any part of the brain could have an effect on the person's mind.
None of the actions that we attribute to the mind has been initiated by electrode stimulation or epileptic discharge. If there were a mechanism in the brain that could do what the mind does, one might expect that the mechanism would betray its presence in a convincing manner by some better evidence of epileptic or electrode activation. The mind makes its impact on the brain but isn't in the brain.
Dr. Sam Parnia, physician at Southampton General Hospital in England.
The brain function these near-death patients were found to have while unconscious is commonly believed to be incapable of sustaining lucid thought processes or allowing lasting memories to form. The brain itself is made up of cells, like all the body's organs, and is not really capable of producing the subjective phenomenon of thought that people have.
A group of professionals studying the mind, including Dr. Subhash Kak, professor of quantum computing and neural networks, Oklahoma University, Dr. Deepak Chopra, board-certified physician, and Dr. Minas Kafidis, quantum physicist and cosmologist at Chapman University. Together they wrote this.
Neuroscience, which considers brain states in terms of electrical and chemical activity in the interconnection of the neurons, that somehow gives rise to awareness, cannot explain where the aware self is located. Your consciousness is using the brain as a processing device, moving the molecules where they are needed in order to create the sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell of the world.
There are many other scientists who have reached the same conclusion. Your mind is not produced by or housed in your brain. As a result, when your brain dies, you will continue to live in your next life. The 14th area of research demonstrating that when your body dies, your mind will continue to live is in near-death experiences. When the brain dies during a trauma and can have no sensory experiences, the mind remarkably has clearer senses. The person having a near-death experience observes and describes what is going on around the body and even travels to different locations. The death of the body is the entry into the life after this life. This is a narration from the book Evidence Beyond a Reasonable Doubt You Will Never Die, about one account of a patient who was put into a death state for surgery and had experiences while her brain was dead.
To remove a large, deadly aneurysm from beneath her brain, Am Reynolds was put into a state of hypothermic cardiac arrest. Her body temperature was lowered to 60 degrees, her heartbeat and breathing were stopped, and the blood was drained from her head, her brain waves flattened, showing no brain activity. After her successful operation, she reported a startling near-death experience. She gave remarkably accurate, detailed descriptions of the surgical procedure. She reported that someone in the operating room said something about her arteries being small, and she described the Midas Rex bone saw as looking like an electric toothbrush, having interchangeable blades, and a high-pitched whirring sound. During the near-death experience, she reported floating out of the operating room and traveling down a tunnel to a light, at the end which her deceased relatives and friends were waiting. Her long-dead grandmother was there. Eventually, her deceased uncle took her back and she re-entered her body. She said that during the experience, she saw with vision that was brighter and more focused and clearer than normal vision. When she heard her deceased grandmother calling, the sound was clearer hearing than she had with her ears, but her eyes were taped shut and her ears were plugged with devices that monitored her brain stem activity by producing loud clicks, drowning out all outside noise. 5 eminent cardiac and medical specialists, Dr. Sam Parnia, Dr. Van Lommel, Dr. Robert Spetzler, Dr. Peter Fenwick, and Dr. Michael Sabom, all supported the accuracy of Pam's stated experience during her clinical death, reporting that what she saw corresponded to what actually happened. She saw and heard details while either sensory deprived and unconscious, with her eyes taped shut and hearing blocked by loud clicks, or while she was brain dead.
The commonly known fact that people near death have lucid experiences of seeing the room where their body is in a near-death state, traveling to other rooms or out of the building, meeting with deceased loved ones, and experiencing the presence of a loving being all demonstrate that when the body is released, we become the eternal being who will never die. These accounts from 5 of the 15 areas of evidence are proof you will continue to live after your body dies. There are many other examples in each one of these areas. You can learn about more examples in the links in the descriptions below. The description below also has the links to the evidence from the other 10 areas of afterlife communication.